Dear students, welcome to class 11th chemistry lesson, some basic concepts of chemistry. In this first part of the chapter, let us quickly revise a few definitions, basic definitions related to chemistry, like matter. Anything that has mass and occupies space is called matter. An atom is the basic unit of matter. For example, Na is an atom of sodium, H is an atom of hydrogen, O is an atom of oxygen, and He is an atom of helium. Molecule, an atom or group of atoms that can exist independently, is called a molecule. For example, H2O can exist independently. This is the formula of the compound H2O. He, being a noble gas, can exist independently like an atom. So we can call it a molecule of helium gas also. Carbon dioxide exists as CO2 and glucose exists as C6H12O6. The next definition is element. It's the pure form of a substance that contains atoms of only one kind. For example, He has only helium atoms. So a sample of helium gas will be having He. We can represent it like single He because it is unreactive gas at normal conditions of temperature and pressure. H2, it has two atoms of hydrogen in a molecule, but the type of atoms is only one. So as written in the definition, only one kind of atoms. Okay. And P4, again it has four atoms of similar kind, same, exactly same. P. S8 has 8 atoms, and so on. The next definition is compound. It's a pure substance having two or more types of elements chemically combined in a fixed or definite ratio. For example, if we take a water molecule, it has two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. This ratio is fixed, and hydrogen and oxygen have reacted chemically with each other to give rise to this compound called water in this example. Similarly, if I take the example of a molecule of carbon dioxide, it has two oxygen atoms chemically combined with one carbon atom. So, a compound is a pure substance in which two or more elements are chemically combined in a fixed ratio. Here, the examples taken, they have two atoms, two type of atoms, but you can take the example of any other bigger compound, say glucose. Glucose has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, and there are many more compounds which have more types of atoms in them. So that's why the definition is written like this: two or more types of elements. Now the next is mixture. It's an impure substance, as the name suggests, having two or more elements, and or I have written compounds physically mixed in any ratio. Now why and slash or is important here? Because you can take example of a mixture in which only elements are mixed. For example, I can take hydrogen gas and oxygen gas in the form of a mixture in a closed container, but I'm not providing the required conditions for them to react with each other. Like in air, you have so many gases. You have oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. You have some other traces of noble gases also, but they're not reacting with each other, right? So if you give such an example where only elements are present, like nitrogen and hydrogen gases, suppose they are there in a container, but I am not giving them the conditions, they are not reacting, so that will be a mixture where only elements are present. But if I take the example of water mixed with sugar or salt, in that case it will be water is a compound, sugar and salts, they are also compounds. Okay, there is some dissolved oxygen also in water, but oxygen O2 is an element. So that's why different examples, they have elements and or compounds in them. Now a mixture is of two types. It may be homogeneous or heterogeneous. Homogeneous mixture, homo means same, so the component is having exactly same composition throughout. That means the components completely mix with each other, like sugar dissolved in water. And as written here, this means the particles of components of the mixture, they are uniformly distributed throughout the bulk of the mixture, and its composition is uniform throughout, same throughout. Sugar solution and air. In air you have, if you talk about absolutely pure air without any pollutants, then you can understand this, that naturally everywhere the composition of air should be almost the same. So it's a mixture, but gases are not reacting with each other. Okay. And in contrast to this, the other type of mixtures are heterogeneous. Hetero means different. So the composition of the mixture is not uniform or same throughout. And sometimes different components are visible also. For example, if I take a mixture of salt and sugar, I can easily make out the particles of sugar and salt in that mixture. I can see them clearly. And grains and pulses, along with some dirt when stone pieces are there, then we can easily, find out that stone piece out of that pulse or anything else that we are taking. So these are a few examples, and there are many more examples. If you understand the basic thing, you will be able to give many more examples yourselves also. Now here are two tables. Actually this portion belongs to physics, but this is in general considered everywhere in science, so you can't just demarcate it. But yes, these conversion factors, like the first table, how to convert, milligram to kilogram, or meter to centimeter, different units, you must remember. The first table is for that only, conversion. And the second table is talking about the seven basic physical quantities. Now these physical quantities and their symbols, name of the SI unit and symbol for SI unit, this is the basic knowledge that we all must have. And the first table will help you a lot if you remember it, that how to convert, suppose you start with meter, then how to convert this to kilometer or giga, tera, zeta, like that. So all the conversion factors are given here, we can use them. I'll give you an example here. If you see carefully, nano, nano is written, and 10 to the power minus 9 factor is written there. That means if you talk about 1 nanometer, that means 10 to the power minus 9 meters is the conversion factor. 1 nanometer is so many meters, and 1 picometer, you can see 10 to the power minus 12 is written here, so that will be 10 to the power minus 12 meters. Okay, so when you move upwards or downwards, the conversion factors are changing. So you'll be using more of this in physics, and it's in chemistry also. Now, the properties of matter and their measurements. Physical and chemical properties. Every substance has unique or characteristic properties, a set of properties which make it unique, different from all other substances. And these properties can be classified into two main categories. Physical properties like color, odor, smell, melting point, boiling point, density, etc. And chemical properties like composition, combustibility, how easily it gets combusted, reactivity with acids and bases. Now, physical properties can be measured or observed without changing the identity or the composition of the substance. What does it mean? It means that if I want to find out the boiling point of water, which is a physical quantity, I'll simply take water and boil it, heat it, and when the boiling point comes, I may use a thermometer. Okay, and when the temperature, the level of mercury in the thermometer is static, it's not changing, then I know the boiling point is achieved. So without changing, because in the form of gaseous vapors of water, again it is H2O, we have not broken the bond between hydrogen and oxygen. That is the meaning of not changing the identity of the compound. For liquid, we write H2O, small l in the bracket, and for vapors, we write H2O, small g in the bracket. So the identity is not changing. But the measurement or observation of chemical properties requires a chemical change to occur. If I want to see when water reacts with sodium metal, then what is formed? Then I will see that it will make NaOH and hydrogen gas is evolved. How do I know it is hydrogen gas? I know its property that it burns with a pop sound. So what happened when I reacted water with the sodium metal? Then I got products which are totally different from the starting material. Now in products you don't have water anymore. So that is the meaning of changing the identity. Now this is the most important part of first chapter, laws of chemical combination. The first law is law of conservation of mass. As you write law of conservation of energy, it was given by Antoine Lavoisier. The name of the scientist is very important. We must know about it. And the statement of law is that matter can neither be created nor be destroyed. This is called law of conservation of mass. The second law is law of definite proportion. Yeah, before we move on to the second law, I must tell you that law of conservation of mass is applicable everywhere in chemistry. Whenever you consider any chemical reaction, you are doing any calculations related to that, you always balance the chemical equation. So why do we balance? So that we can carry out the exact calculations. We can predict how much product can be formed. We can predict how much more reactant is required depending upon the conditions that are being supplied. So why do we balance chemical equations? Because it is in accordance with the law of conservation of mass. Now the second statement, second law, that is the law of definite proportions. It was given by Joseph Proust, and he stated that a given compound always contains exactly the same proportion of elements by weight. One example is here. So example of a compound which has copper, carbon and oxygen in it, and these are the percentages in natural sample, percentage of copper, carbon and oxygen respectively, and exactly same percentages are there in the synthetic sample, because when scientists synthesize a compound in the lab, they cannot change the composition, then it will not remain the same compound. I'll give you one more example. Suppose they're talking about NH3, ammonia. Okay, now in ammonia only two type of elements are present, nitrogen and hydrogen. And we all know the formula of compound ammonia is NH3. Now whatever is the percentage composition according to their masses, if a scientist is making the same chemical ammonia in the lab, that would be called a synthetic sample, because they are synthesizing, it is not natural. Now the compound remains the same, NH3, so they have to be very careful that the percentage composition cannot change. So this thing is very important. So that is why it is called law of definite proportions, fixed proportion, that proportion cannot change. And one more thing very important here, that we should always write the statements of the laws as it is. We cannot change the statements given by the scientists. So remember the statements as it is. The next law is law of multiple proportions, given by Dalton in 1803. According to this law, if two elements combine to give rise to more than one compound, then the masses of one element that combines with the fixed mass of the other element, they are in the ratio of small whole numbers. Let us understand this law with the help of an example which is given here. The example is hydrogen and oxygen. They are able to give rise to these two compounds on chemical reaction, water and hydrogen peroxide. So if we take the quantity of hydrogen fixed in both the cases, exactly same, that is 2 grams, then the quantity of oxygen, that is 16 and 32 gram respectively, which are reacting with hydrogen, they have a simple whole number ratio with each other, that is 16 is to 32 is a simple whole number ratio 1 is to 2. Then the next law is Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volumes. It was given by Gay-Lussac, a scientist, in 1808. And he observed that when gases combine or they are getting produced in a chemical reaction, they do so in a simple ratio by volume, provided all gases are at the same temperature and pressure. Now, this example where hydrogen and oxygen gases are reacting to give rise to water in the form of water vapors, because the law is about gases when they combine or are getting produced in a chemical reaction. So in this reaction, if I take a fixed volume of hydrogen, say 100 ml, and I'm taking oxygen 50 ml, so when they combine, when they chemically combine, I should say, when they react, because the ratio of hydrogen and oxygen in the balanced chemical equation is 2 is to 1. We write 2H2 plus 1 O2 gives 2H2O. So keeping that in mind, here also, if you keep the conditions of temperature and pressure fixed, if you control the conditions, then gases have a fixed volume. So if hydrogen has 100 ml volume and oxygen is just half of that we are starting with, then we are taking them exactly in the required ratio of 2 is to 1 as per the balanced chemical equation. So that is how we get 100 ml of water, because if I start with 2 moles of hydrogen reacting with 1 mole of oxygen, I get 2 moles of water. Same way here, we can represent the equation which is taking place at a fixed conditions of temperature and pressure. We can find out the ratio of their volumes also. So here if you write down the ratio of the reactants only, it will be 2 is to 1. If you write the ratio of the volumes of reactants and product, which is also a gas here, it will be 2 is to 1 is to 2. Now you can try this question. It is from NCERT exercise of this chapter, 1.26 question number. If 10 volumes of dihydrogen, that is H2 gas, reacts with 5 volumes of dioxygen, O2 gas, how many volumes of water vapor would be produced? So my answer would be 10 volume. As in the reaction given above, we have written 100 ml and 50 ml. So we'll write 10 volume and 5 volume as given in the question. So my answer would be 10 volumes of water. The next is Avogadro's law. It states that equal volumes of all gases at the same temperature and pressure contain equal number of molecules. We can understand this like this, that 1 mole of any gas at standard temperature and pressure, STP, it occupies 22.4 liters of volume. This is experimentally found result. And 1 mole of any gas contains molecules equal to Avogadro's number, that is 6.023 10 to the power 23. So according to the law, if I keep the conditions of temperature and pressure fixed, that is, let us say at standard temperature and pressure, 1 mole of any gas will contain 6.023 10 to the power 23 molecules of the gas. I can relate it with the volume also, as written here, that 22.4 liters of any gas will contain this quantity, that is the molecules equal to Avogadro's number. So that is the law. Then there is Dalton's atomic theory. There are some postulates. Let us quickly discuss them one by one. The postulates are like this, that first is matter consists of indivisible atoms according to the theory, and all atoms of a given element have identical properties including identical mass, and atoms of different elements, they differ in mass. These are the points given by Dalton in his theory. And then compounds, the third one, compounds are formed when atoms of different elements combine in a fixed ratio. And the last is chemical reactions involve reorganization of atoms. These are neither created nor destroyed in a chemical reaction. So if you see them, read them carefully and understand. The first two, the first matter consists of indivisible atoms. It does not hold any importance now. This is saying that atom is indivisible. If atom is indivisible, then how can we talk about even smaller particles present inside the atom? That means it is no more indivisible. And the second point is all atoms of a given element have identical properties. Okay, correct. Including identical mass. And atoms of different elements differ in mass. So here it is also not holding good anymore because now the isotopes have been discovered. We know that the atoms of same element, they may have different mass. Hydrogen, carbon, chlorine, so many different elements are there whose isotopes exist. So first and second point, they do not hold any importance anymore. So these 2 points are wrong, you can say. Third is a simple definition of compound, that is correct. And the fourth is chemical reactions involve reorganization of atoms. Yes, suppose the nitrogen and oxygen, they are reacting with each other. So unless nitrogen NN, the bond breaks and the bond between OO breaks in oxygen, how will they react with each other, make a bond with each other and give rise to NO or NO2 depending upon the conditions. So reorganization, whatever you have, like H2 and O2 you have, so the bond between hydrogen atoms will break, the bond between oxygen atoms will break, and they will combine with each other to give rise to H2O, where oxygen is in the center and two hydrogens are attached to it. So this is called a reorganization, and the breaking of older bonds and formation of new bonds takes place in every chemical reaction. So the third and fourth points are absolutely correct. Now, atomic and molecular masses. The next topic, very simple one. How do they know that a particular atom or a molecule has this mass? There is a technique called mass spectrometry that is used for determination of the atomic masses accurately. And later in 19th century, scientists could determine the mass of one atom relative to another experimental means also. So what is that now? Hydrogen being the lightest atom, that was arbitrarily assigned a mass of 1 without any units, and other elements were assigned masses relative to it. Like if something is having mass 4 times of it, we are relating it to 1 of hydrogen, so we say this is 4 times heavier than hydrogen, this is 10 times heavier, this is 100 times heavier. So that is the relation, that is the relative quantity mass that we are talking about here. Now the present system, it started from mass spectrometry and then the technique where they were relating it to the mass of hydrogen. And now the present system of atomic masses is based on carbon 12 as the standard. What does carbon 12 mean? It is the isotope of carbon which has mass 12. That was taken as a reference, and carbon 12 is one of the isotopes of carbon, and it can be represented as 12C or C12 also. Atomic mass unit, that is, one atomic mass unit is defined as mass exactly equal to 1/12 of the mass of one carbon atom, that is C12 atom, and it has been calculated to be equal to 1 AMU is 1.66056 10 to the power minus 24 grams. Now if I have 1 AMU equal to so many grams, then mass of an atom of hydrogen would be exactly almost equal to this. That is why when we calculate, like experimentally it is found that the mass of one atom of hydrogen is 1.6736 10 to the power minus 24 grams, and 1 AMU is equal to 1.66056 10 to the power minus 24 grams. If I divide this mass of one atom of hydrogen by the quantity 1 AMU in grams, then I will be able to convert this quantity of hydrogen mass in grams to AMU, and that comes out to be 1.0080. We generally round it off and take it as 1. So we say the mass of hydrogen is 1. Similarly, the mass of oxygen, O16 I'm talking about, the isotope of oxygen which has mass 16, its calculation shows that it would be 15.995 AMU. So we take it as 16. And at present AMU has been replaced by U, that is called unified mass. And when we use atomic mass of elements in calculations, then we generally take their average atomic masses, which will be discussed in the upcoming slides. Now, in this slide, this is very important to note that from where this value, that 1 AMU is equal to so many grams, has come. If you read the definition carefully, it's written that 1/12 of the mass of one carbon atom. Okay, so if I take 1 mole of C12 atoms, we generally write the mass of carbon is 12. So that if I take as 12 grams, that would be the mass of 6.023 10 to the power 23 carbon atoms. So if I divide 12 grams by Avogadro's number, I will be able to calculate the mass of one atom of carbon. So that would be 12 divided by Avogadro's number. And if I have to find out 1 AMU value, I'll simply divide it again by 12, because that is 1/12 of the mass of one atom of carbon. So that comes out to be 1 divided by Avogadro. That is, if I divide 12 by Avogadro's number, I'll get the mass of one atom of carbon, C12, and I'll again divide this by 12. So that will come out to be 12 divided by Avogadro's number into 1 upon 12. So 12 and 12 cancels. So 1 AMU is 1 upon Avogadro's number, so many grams. And when you calculate, you will get this value. 1.66056 10 to the power minus 24 grams. This value is very important. And when we use atomic masses of elements in calculations, we actually use average atomic masses. I'm coming to that now. But before that, this question you can try. I have already given you the answer. 1.30 from the exercise. What will be the mass of 112C atom in grams? That would be 12 divided by Avogadro's number, because 12 grams is the mass of 1 mole of carbon atoms. And 1 mole is 6.023 10 to the power 23 atoms. So simply divide 12 by Avogadro's number, and always write your answer in the decimal form, at least up to 2 decimal places, and always write units with the answer. This is very important. Next is average atomic mass. Now, when you see the values like masses of elements, atoms given in fractions, and we know that mass, what is mass number? That is the sum of nucleons, neutrons and protons in an atom. So this should not be fractional, but you see that mass number is related to mass, which we take in grams or U, and in some cases it is fractional. So the answer comes from average atomic mass, that many naturally occurring elements, they exist as more than one isotope, and the natural composition we take, that is called relative abundance, and the average atomic mass of the element is calculated, is that can be computed. Let us take this example which is given here. In this, you have C12, C13 and C14 isotopes of carbon, and their relative abundance are given here, the percentages. Suppose you have 100 atoms of carbon, so out of 100, 98.892 would be C12, 1.108 would be C13, and 2 into 10 to the power minus 10 would be C14. Now, I cannot take 98.892 atoms. So this is a way of explaining it, that percent we are taking. Okay. So out of 100, so many are C12. And their atomic masses are given in the AMU in the last column. So when I have to find out that this is the relative abundance, naturally occurring sample of carbon has C12, 13 and 14 in these quantities, how do I calculate the average of anything? I'll find out the total mass of all the isotopes and divide it by the number of atoms that we are considering as 100. Let us see how. Here, from this data, I have kept the table again here so that you can refer to it. The average atomic mass of carbon can be calculated as simply multiply the percentage given in second column with the mass given in third column and just add them. 98.892 into 12 plus 1.108 into 13.00335 plus 2 into 10 to the power minus 10 into 14.00317. This will give you the total mass. Now divide this by the number of atoms that we are considering, 100, because this is percent. Okay, and here you will see that it's written 0.988 instead of 98.89, because they have divided, before adding they have divided all these percentages by 100. So it is one and the same thing. You can divide it initially, or you can just add them and divide the whole thing later. Here your answer would be 12.011 U. Now this is the average atomic mass of carbon. So this is how we calculate the average atomic mass. And here are two questions from the exercise of the chapter in your NCERT. In question number 1.9, the natural abundance of chlorine isotopes is given. So simply multiply the 75.77 value by molar mass 34.9689 and multiply 24.23 by 36.9659, add them and divide by 100. Your answer will be around 35.5. Similarly, in 1.32, 3 isotopes of argon have been given. Follow the same procedure as we have done for carbon and you will be able to get your answer. Now the next topic is molecular mass. Molecular mass is the sum of atomic masses of the elements present in a molecule. Like the example of methane is given here and water is given here. So when we calculate the molecular mass of methane, the mass of a molecule of methane, we simply add the atomic mass of carbon, 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens. Same way in water, we add mass of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, and we get the respective values. So this is how you can calculate the molecular mass of any molecule, by simply adding the atomic masses of the elements present in it, and it's obtained by multiplying the atomic mass of each element by the number of its atom and then adding them together. Another term is formula mass. Formula mass is used for ionic compounds. Some substances like sodium chloride, they do not contain discrete molecules. That means they do not exist as single NaCl unit. So in such compounds, positive ions and negative ions, they are arranged in a 3D structure as shown here. This is called lattice. This is the lattice. You can see here the blue ones are chlorides and the red ones are sodium ions. So they are arranged in a particular manner. If you see the whole structure, then each Na plus ion is surrounded by 6 Cl minus ions in all the 3 dimensions. If you see, and take any Cl minus ion, it will be surrounded by 6 Na plus ions. But the ratio, if you take the total quantity, would be 1:1. So the formula that we write is NaCl. That is why the term formula mass is used. It will be simply calculated by adding the mass of sodium and chlorine, sodium ion and chloride ion, 23 plus 35.5, 58.5 U, but only the term is different. The method of calculation is same. Now this can be calculated now. This is solved example 1.1. Calculate the molecular mass of glucose molecule. So C6H12O6 is the molecular formula. So simply multiply 6 by the atomic mass of carbon, and there are 12 hydrogen atoms, so multiply 12 by the atomic mass of hydrogen, and there are 6 oxygens, so multiply 6 by 16. Then after multiplication you just add them and your answer would be 180.162 U. Simple question. Same way you can try these two questions from the exercise. First question, calculate the molar mass of the following. So molar mass you can express in terms of grams. Method will be same, like H2O would be 18 grams and molecular mass would be 18 U. That is the only difference. And how much copper can be obtained from 100 grams of copper sulfate? For this you find out the molar mass of copper sulfate, and then using unitary method you can find out that so many grams of copper sulfate have this quantity of this much quantity of copper. So 100 grams would be having how much? So once you try these questions, it will be easy for you to apply these concepts later for other topics that we are going to do in the chapter. So that is all for this presentation. In the next presentation, we shall take the more upcoming topics from NCRT. But before that, do this particular presentation, the topics on which this is based thoroughly. Thank you.